This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to DRTSPR show. This is Dr. Tangella Shiva Prasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab, hello, and a warm welcome to our new guest. But for you, viewers of DRTSPR channel and the world, he may be a new guest. But for me, last 2 years I have been in pursuant to gain his knowledge, to understand his knowledge, to bring his experience, enormous experience to into the public domain through DRTSPR channel. So my endeavor of 2 hours, 2 years has become successful today. Not late, but with a very relevant budget 2023-24 because he is Mr. Narasimha Reddy, retired professor in economics from Hyderabad Central University. Sir, namaskaram. Welcome to this special show. Your enormous experiences and before we just ask you to comment on the 23 and 24 union budget which has already been presented and in lieu of Telangana State Assembly budget to be presented on the 6th of February after 2 or 3 days, what is that people should look into the budget? How is that they make people to wait the entire 2 months, 3 months, and it always gathers or gains media headlines, and at the end of budget some section or the other section always feel deprived. State and the center, they keep fighting and political one-upmanship, and at all the 30% slab of corporates never changes and they get more and more benefits year after year. ఎందుకు ఈ విధంగా ప్రజలను బిచ్చగాల్లాగా చేస్తా ఉన్నారు బడ్జెట్ పేరు మీద? మీరు ఏమనుకోకండి నేను ఇటువంటి హార్ష్ టర్మ్ అంటే, ఎందుకంటే ప్రజలు, రాజ్యాంగం, అన్ని వనరులు ప్రజలకు చెందినవి. ఆల్ రిసోర్సెస్ బిలాంగ్ టు ది సిటిజన్స్, హానరబుల్ సిటిజన్స్, అండ్ దే ఆర్ ఎ కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్ అథారిటీ దెమ్సెల్వ్స్. హౌ ఇస్ దట్ దే ఆర్ నాట్ ఇన్వాల్వ్డ్ అట్ ఎనీ లెవెల్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ బడ్జెట్? పంచాయతీలో చర్చ జరగదు. నో డిస్కషన్ ఇన్ పంచాయత్, మున్సిపాలిటీస్, ప్రాపర్ అసెంబ్లీ, దే ఆల్సో స్ట్రైట్ అవే present budget, and again parliament. There is absolutely no coordination from panchayat to parliament. It is all top down from parliament assembly to panchayats or to the people. And they say pre-economic surveys, and they say last year we have done this year we are going to do this is the welfare, this is the development. పోయిన సంవత్సరం ఇది చేసాం, ఈ సంవత్సరం ఇది చేస్తాం, ఈసారి ఇది సంక్షేమం, పోయినసారి అది సంక్షేమం, ఈసారి ఇది అభివృద్ధి, పోయినసారి అభివృద్ధి. ఇదంతా ఏంది సార్? ఈ డబ్బులు ఎవరివి? ఈ వనరులు ఎవరివి? అసలు మమ్మల్ని, ప్రజలను మనను దీంట్లో భాగస్వామ్యం చేయకుండా ఈ రాజకీయ నాయకులు, రాజకీయ పార్టీలు, వారికి తోడు అధికారులు, వారికి సంబంధించిన మీడియా ఈ విధంగా ప్రజలను ఒక సస్పెన్స్లో పెట్టడం, తర్వాత వాళ్ళ మధ్యలో విభేదాలు సృష్టించడం, అసలు లాస్ట్కు ప్రజలకు అర్థం కాకుండా ఈరోజు ఈసారి నాకు తెలిసి ఒక సామాన్యుడిగా 7 లక్షల సీలింగ్ లిమిట్ అన్నాడు. పోయినసారి 5 లక్షలు ఉన్నప్పుడు ఒక రేటు, 5 నుంచి 10కి ఒక స్లాబ్, ఒక ఇంట్రెస్ట్ రేట్ ఉండే. కానీ ఇప్పుడు 7 చేసిన తర్వాత 7 to 9, 10 to 11, మళ్ళీ అక్కడ పర్సంటేజ్ ఆఫ్ ఇది పెరుగుతా పోయింది. 30% స్లాబ్ వచ్చే వరకు వాళ్ళకి ఏం మారడం లేదు. లోన్లు కానీ అన్ని బ్యాంక్స్లలో పెద్ద ఎత్తున వాళ్ళకే ఇస్తా ఉన్నారు కార్పొరేట్స్. చూసారు ఏ విధంగా కార్పొరేట్ లూటీ జరుగుతూ ఉంది, లూటింగ్ ఆఫ్ బ్యాంక్స్ అండ్ నాన్ పర్ఫార్మెన్స్ అసెట్స్. అండ్ వేర్ ఈస్ ది నాన్ పర్ఫార్మెన్స్ అసెట్స్ ఓవర్ ది ఇయర్స్? ఆ లెక్క ఎక్కడ ఉంది? విచ్ బ్యాంక్ హ్యాస్ గివెన్ టు విచ్ కార్పొరేట్ కంపెనీ how much did they return? If I don't pay one EMI, they bloody run around. నా ఇంటికి వచ్చి గొడవ చేస్తూ ఉంటాడు బ్యాంకు, వనయ్య వన సొత్తేదో పోయినట్టు. కానీ అక్కడ 1000 కోట్లు ఎత్తుకపోతా ఉంటే మాట్లాడడంలే. రైతులు ఆత్మహత్యలు చేసుకుంటుంటే వాడికి 1,00,000 రుణమాఫీ ఇవ్వాలంటే పెద్ద కష్టం. ఈడ 1000 కోట్లు ప్రతి బడ్జెట్ లో మాఫీ ఉంటుంది. At the end of the day, there is subsidy as well as they are waiving off thousands of crores of rupees for corporates, but not for farmers or middle class employees, women, unemployed youth, or for other weaker sections of the society. So what is budget, sir? Budget ante emti, sir?
Thank you, Dr. Shiva Prasad Reddy garu, for inviting me to DRTPSR channel. I'm sorry I have not responded to you as enthusiastically as I should have because of various other engagements. and also a lot of hesitation. I don't want to go on channels easily because I personally feel I'm a person who may not be very jubilantly involved in showing off that I know something. I'm a very humble citizen. As far as this, your introduction to the way in which people look towards that budget and the way in which perhaps it is presented certainly contextualizes budgetary procedures from what it should be to that of what they have been pulled down or degenerated. Because a budget is supposed to be a statement of, let's say, aspirations of people, and the government which perhaps tries to fulfill those aspirations in, let's say, charting out a financial path that would help in realizing those aspirations. This perhaps is supposed to be the role of a budget in any democratic society which has been running in terms of a certain constitutional objectives, including that of India, which is one of the best, perhaps morally, socially high principles that have gone into our constitution. But I think when it comes to the question of the way in which the present uh, rulers are trying to behave, the very concept of the first statement of the Constitution, we the people, that perhaps has been forgotten. We expect when a budget is discussed, it is discussed among the people through their representatives. Every representative or a parliamentarian, or if it's a state, let's say a member of an assembly, is supposed to be a voice of the people who have elected them. That's perhaps the spirit. But what exactly happens is quite different. Let me come to that of, let's say, the way in which perhaps we, even with limited kind of, as you said, even this kind of a degeneration in trying to uh, look at, let's say, a budget as some kind of a people's kind of a budget. And then, of course, it is appropriated by the ruler's budget. Even then, we start looking at the budget with some hope. The hope is that every year before the budget, we have an economic survey which tries to present what is the nature of the Indian economy, if it's Indian budget we are talking about, in the larger context of the world economy. I mean, if you look at this year's economic survey, it does talk in terms of Indian situation in a larger world context, where there has been, now we know that the entire world was shaken by the COVID pandemic, and then most of the countries are not still able to recover. In fact, the whole world was shaken in terms of economic terms from 2008 economic crisis. Although India narrowly escaped 2008 shocks as much as perhaps the rest of the world, we did suffer other kinds of calamities, economic calamities in India. For instance, 2016 demonetization, and later closely following for a year the introduction of a very ill-planned GST introduction. These things caused as much disturbance to Indian economy as 2008 caused economic crisis to the rest of the world. And then following these crises, we land in, let's say, the COVID crisis, which disturbed all economies. It disturbed in such a way that what we call as supply chains, let's say the kind of trade which links, let's say, raw material sources from some places to manufacturing in some other places, and people also moving by way of migration to different places where work is available from their own, let's say, places of living. Once it is disturbed, we have seen internally the kind of crisis we have suffered in terms of migrant labor crisis. And then, of course, the economy has slipped in to that of, let's say, one of the lowest levels of growth, -6. And then when it comes to the question of employment, there was a total collapse, highest in ever India's memory. It's almost, let's say, 40% in a peak period. From this, there is a gentle kind of a recovery. Of course, the world is still at a low rate of growth, but it is supposed to be last year, I mean, that's the current year, 22-23, it is supposed to end with that of 3.2 or so. Next year, that is the budget year that we are talking about, it may further go down to that of 2.9% world growth. When it comes to the question of India itself, it is struggling to, let's say, come to from the -6% in the COVID year to that of, let's say, even 6%. In fact, what is expected is 5.9. The estimates differ to that of 6%. In this context, what are the main kind of, let's say, either in India or abroad? One of the major things that is talked about is the whole world is under the crisis called, let's say, inflation. Crisis called unemployment. In fact, one of the major problems that India faces is still unemployment. It is still 8% in December 2022. It's one of the highest kind of, let's say, unemployment situation. Therefore, one expects that when we are talking in terms of the current economic situation, it is the budget which tries to look at how to improve from this situation. If we are saying inflation and then of course unemployment are major crises around which perhaps other things also revolve. In fact, generally when we talk in terms of an economy, these two are supposed to be very major kind of a problems which a government is supposed to handle. But when we turn to that of the present budget, it starts more with that of rhetoric rather than that of addressing. That's these two problems are hardly highlighted in the budget. But they talk in terms of any budget is supposed to be an annual statement of revenues and then how you go about spending it. But instead, you start talking in terms of, let's say, 25 years. What is called that you give fancy names to that Amrit Kal. And then, therefore, you say it's the first budget in the so-called next 25 years of Amrit Kal. We don't know whether it's Amrit or poison, the way in which things are happening. It's very difficult to imagine that people are suffering. There's widespread unemployment, the kind of, let's say, crisis in learning crisis. You talk in terms of the way in which the schools function, the kind of distress that school children learning suffered during the COVID. Still, of course, we have wonderful reports like the ACR annual status report of education. And we have also the so-called annual achievement survey by the government itself in 2021. They show the kind of drastic decline in learning in schools. See, when it comes to the question of these problems like unemployment, inflation, crisis in terms of, let's say, schools, education in general, and then, of course, health, the way in which this budget addresses these problems, there is hardly any mention. It talks in terms of catering to that of, let's say, their own ideology. I mean, that's when introducing me. And then, of course, talking about budget, you said some interesting things about the way in which budgets are, let's say, used these days. Yes, while we think that a budget is supposed to be largely an economic statement of raising resources and trying to, let's say, use these resources effectively for the larger welfare of the people through that of expenditure prioritized on the basis of people's needs. Over a period of time, it has also become a political document. And therefore, what I do is I just refer to that of this political dimension because the numbers, of course, one could talk in terms, they're all before us. I find that this budget, the way in which perhaps the finance minister presented it. And it's very interestingly, unlike earlier times, the prime minister follows it with a long speech as to how this budget is going to achieve things perhaps that the finance minister has promised. Both of them talking in terms of the so-called Amrit Kal, how this is laying foundation for that. But I think in our understanding, it does lay the foundation for the present government's ideology. That political kind of dimension comes in. In fact, people also expect, general conversation is, a budget is not only economic context, as I said about the what happened last year in terms of, let's say, growth, employment, unemployment, etc. People also see as to what perhaps it would be in terms of political situation. And everybody is saying this is a budget before the last budget before the present union government goes to next elections. And therefore, naturally, one would perhaps expect the government also put a concern. And therefore, the balance is whether it tries to make more of, let's say, its own ideological orientation, or it addresses the people's immediate needs. There is some kind of, let's say, uh, complete disconnect between what people are expecting, what this budget is doing. Now, first, let me make a statement. It is very strongly an ideological budget in the sense that it's in the pursuit of the present government's neoliberalism, which means that it hesitates to, let's say, enter into areas where people are concerned, not merely employment, unemployment. We know that right from, let's say, 2016, even before COVID, growth was coming down from about 8%, which was very high growth before, let's say, uh, 12, 11, 12, 2011, 12,
Sir,
it was
one
high
second, sir.
7 years. Yes.
Sir, 1 second. 1 second. I'm just connecting to the better net so that this poor net. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I hear.
Yeah. I only hope the earlier part is also there in the recording because there was frequent interruptions in
Oh,
the net. That is how they try to hack whenever I do a show, and that is the I don't know boon or bane. I feel boon. Yeah, you are just talking about the 12% uh, inflation and
yeah,
unemployment.
I think, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, not 12%, but of course, I'm talking about basic problems that the economy has faced. One is, of course, there is slowing down. The ఆర్థిక మాంద్యం కొన్ని సంవత్సరాలకు జరుగుతుంది. It's been slowing, growth has been slowing down, not because, I mean, this point must be understood, not because of COVID alone. Even before COVID, from 16, 15, 16, 2015, 16, there has been a gradual decline. And this, I think, is along with that of the kind of shocks. I mean, the first shocks, as I was telling earlier, that this present government, which has been in its earlier, let's say, phase, before 19, also caused a lot of, let's say, uh, trouble by its own wrong kind of policies, like we have said already, the demonetization, introducing very uh, wrongly designed GST kind of policies. I mean, they add to that of, let's say, the kind of crisis in terms of earlier also, right from late 90s, although the growth was high in so-called post-liberalization period or neoliberal period, One of the major concerns was lack of growth of employment. We used to talk in terms of even before the present BJP government came to power, some kind of a jobless growth. And that has turned in recent years into that of job loss growth. In fact, there are actually loss of jobs. I mean, that we have seen much in its vivid dimensions in the last 2-3 years. And the most disturbing thing about this, whatever growth that has happened, is it's not only high unemployment and then no jobs being created, it also comes from that of, let's say, with inflationary kind of pressures. But the worst part is that of growing inequalities. Everyone knows now the Oxfam report and how it talks in terms of, let's say, extreme inequalities. That while rich grow richer, the poor perhaps continue to live in a situation struggling to meet their basic needs. That's the kind of situation. Therefore, when I refer to that of, let's say, the present government's economic philosophy, it doesn't address the major crisis, not only declining growth, but of course it swears by growth. It doesn't address as to what is happening to that of this growth that is happening. The inequality is a central question. It is going to hit us in a much more severe way as we proceed. The entire people, rich poor division apart, we have other divisions also this government has created in terms of social divisions. And the combination of this would be very disastrous. Therefore, when it comes to the budget, how does this budget address the kind of problems that we are talking in terms of? See that when it comes to the growth, the decline in growth, trend decline in growth from 2015, 16 onwards, to a large extent is because of decline in savings rate. As a consequence, decline in both rate of investment by the private sector and of course rate of investment. This government talks in terms of uh, privatization, but without talking in terms of investment, public investment being increasing. It's very happy selling government public assets and then using it as a part of the budget resources, rather than that of investing more and then of course improving the entire economic situation. Therefore, over a period of time, if you look at the kind of savings situation, from something like about 30% uh, in the GDP savings in 16-17, it has gradually come down now to that of 28%. As a consequence, uh, there has also been decline in, let's say, investments, what we call as gross capital formation in the country. The gross capital formation, including that of borrowed money for investment purposes, has also declined from something like, it was a peak of something like 34%. It has come to that of, let's say, 30%. It is in this context, the government is concerned about growth, because without improvement in investment, there is not likely to be growth, because this government swears by growth, although it doesn't perhaps address as to how this growth, the fruits of the growth should be distributed. I mean, invariably, what has been happening is the growth is invariably favoring the rich, and then, of course, the consequence is that of increasing inequalities. Therefore, the budget in terms of, let's say, addressing growth, it has come out with certain propositions. For instance, it talks in terms of 33% in increase for the first time all these years, when gross national kind of a capital investment was declining, as I said, from something like 32% to that of less than 28%. It never addressed it, and it just, let's say, its own allocations for, let's say, investment. 3 years back, it announced grand in a very jubilant way that they will perhaps mobilize 100 lakh crores for infrastructure development. The idea is, of course, the public investment in infrastructure would lead to that of stimulating private investment. Now we are saying private investment is not forthcoming. because private corporates are saying that the demand is not reviving because people do not have adequate income in their hands. Therefore, even the built capacity is used only about 85%. And therefore, the government is concerned about their obsession of growth. Therefore, they have come out in some big way. That's why the more advertised part is that they have raised the so-called public investment in infrastructure from something like less than 7 lakh crores to that of, let's say, now 10 lakh crores. I mean, that perhaps is desirable. It's long delayed. You need infrastructure investment. It should have been done much earlier. But anyway, now because they don't have any other goal, they have come to invest, let's say, uh, 10 lakh crores. That's promised. In fact, how much is invested? Because if you look at last year's allocation for infrastructure, it has been over a period of time, it has been falling. You allocate something, you don't spend it. That's what exactly has happened last year also. It was 7 lakh crores plus, but it has ended up with that of less than 7 crores. I mean, these things happen, but this year also we have to see this 33% in budget provision for so-called infrastructure, how much it would be spent. We know there are high allocations for railways. It's desirable. Our railways are languishing due to lack of adequate investment for a long time. Railways which were much behind in terms of their quality when we started in 60s, 70s, like China, I think you just cannot compare. They have come to that of some kind of a situation in transport, particular railways. They're they're in a position to beat even the Western countries in the railways. Ours is languishing, but in our country, railways are very essential because the most extensively people-oriented transport system is railways. It's working. People respond to that, and therefore it is desirable. But I think it's also long delayed. And then, of course, other things is there are other challenges coming in. For instance, the kind of semiconductors, the kind of materials we don't have to meet. I mean, we are moving increasingly to that of, let's say, what perhaps is referred to green energy. There is a lot of emphasis made in the budget on green energy, but it has to be done. And then they are trying to provide certain concessions, that import duty concessions and all that. And at the same time, if you look at, let's say, the kind of foreign trade situation of India, we have a drastic decline in our exports. There is a saving grace was we had an opportunity to export agriculture products, particularly rice. Last year, we have exported 15 million tons, which perhaps is a record kind of export. And that accounted for substantial rise in agricultural exports, which never happened earlier. Because of the global situation, we had a market and we also had reasonably agriculture performance in spite of the neglect that we can see in agriculture even now. Because they think agriculture has solved food problem. Agriculture is doing 4%, 3% even in crisis. Therefore, you don't have to bother. We have seen the kind of troubles that perhaps been highlighted by farmers' agitation, and how, of course, they tried to promise farmers doubling of their income and totally forgot about it. 22 is over. In 15, 16, they said that farmers' income by 22 would be, let's say, double. But I think if you look closely, leave alone doubling, there is hardly any kind of, let's say, more than 20% increase in their incomes compared to that of, let's say, other incomes, and perhaps they compared to the incomes of the rich corporate sector, which is enormous kind of profits acquired over a period of time. Now, leaving this initiative in capital investment, some concessions for inputs in, let's say, industry, which is taking a turn to that of, let's say, high technology, uh, and we turn to that of the rest of the economy. In fact, the way in which perhaps the exports, declining exports, increasing what we refer to current account deficit, which is threatening to, let's say, disturb our even, let's say, foreign exchange resources. It's also threatening to push the value of rupee in foreign exchange terms. None of these things get, let's say, adequate kind of attention. But worse is when it comes to the question of, let's say, pushing through certain policies, uh, which I would consider very essential for the larger welfare of the people. This is where we talk of agriculture, we talk of, let's say, social sector in general, including that of, let's say, education, health, and other kind of policies. I would just refer to that of, let's say, the gross neglect of, let's say, agriculture. Agriculture allocations in the budget reached almost, let's say, 20% in 1920, 2019-20. But when it comes to the question of that, reached almost 4.2% of the total budget expenditure. One would expect, in the context of a widespread kind of, in fact, today in the parliament, they have presented the facts about, let's say, farmer suicides. It continues. I mean, the highest number of suicides, Telangana also comes as the third highest number of suicides during the last 3 years. It is something like slightly more than 3,000 suicides, even after, let's say, the kind of crisis we have seen earlier. And under these circumstances, when farmers are taking their lives out, that is an extreme one. That for every farmer who is committing suicide, there are thousands of farmers who are not able to both ends meet. And this is the situation. In this situation, one expected that there would be more coming to that of agriculture. In fact, there was also popular talk that even small doses that perhaps which Prime Minister's Kisan, uh, PM Kisan of 6,000 given and let's say paltry 2,000 in 3 installments, people expected that would increase. But nothing has, instead of that, actually the budget allocation, total allocation for agriculture and allied activities has actually come down by almost, let's say, about 8 to 9,000 crores. And in terms of, let's say, budget allocation, it has come down from, let's say, 3.84% of the total budget to that of, let's say, 3.2%. In fact, if you look at, let's say, even that PM Kisan itself, that even 6,000 allocation itself, of the total amount that's allocated has come down from something like 15.5 thousand crores to that of, let's say, 13.6 thousand crores. And literally cutting the budget. I mean, this you see, I mean, this is not, I'm sorry, this is not PM Kisan, it's Fasal, that's the insurance. PM, uh, what is, they call it as, let's say,
Fasal,
PM Fasal Bima.
Yojana,
Fasal Bima has come down, and
Bima Yojana.
similarly, PM Kisan also has come down from 68,000 to 60,000. And people are expecting it should be more, the allocation must increase. It has literally come down to that of, let's say, 68 to that of 60,000. And the worst is that there is, of course, some kind of a employment, which is some kind of a part of support to that of those who are unemployed, which did a great deal of help to an extent in rural areas. This is the program called MGNREG. This is a flagship program for earlier government. This government also, during the COVID crisis, this is the one which saved many people who have returned from, let's say, loss of jobs in urban areas. They are still, the demand is very high. And in fact, if we look at the allocation last year, budget allocation, 73,000 crores. Seeing that there is a more demand, the revised budget, last year's budget, 22-23 budget, increased it in revision to 89,000 crores. But this budget cuts it down to that is 60,000 crores. It is itself. People are, let's say, still without any proper regular employment. As a last resort, they are going to that of do hard work, manual kind of a physical work, but they have no other go. But that kind of a support also is seen as something not desirable, and they cut it drastically from 89,000 crores revised budget to that of, let's say, 60,000 crores. It's almost, let's say, one-third cut. Although, if you look at budget to budget, it may be slightly less with the cutting down.
That means
Same
they are
thing with that.
destroying rural economy. They are destroying rural economy. Agriculture
Yeah,
budget is
certainly.
reduced, and
Yeah,
national guarantee employment, rural employment guarantee program, they have reduced such a huge way. That means
absolutely.
youth no longer will be in the villages, and farmers will no longer do the agriculture. Then from where will you get the food? That means they are handing over everything to corporate world or genome food crops, which we have to again import. Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Sorry.
In fact, they have promised a lot, making these while they withdrew after a long struggle, farmer struggle, agitation last year. They have promised to, let's say, come out with that as a proper design of, let's say, so-called support price. And in
Yeah.
fact, earlier they used to uh, provide for MIS kind of a thing, electronic monitoring of, let's say, ensuring prices. That allocation, which used to be about, it's not big, even 1,500 crores, that's completely wiped out. And same thing for, let's say, provision facilitating, let's say, MIS. I mean, what we call not MIS, but the minimum MSP. That also is gone now. They don't talk about support price at all in this budget. And there is
That's what.
nothing like a conceiving. And if you go down, if you look at, let's say, the kind of small help that farmers got in terms of subsidies, there, I think, talking in terms of subsidies to farmers also, maybe they are not running it as feed bees. Actually, when it comes to fertilizer subsidy, it is a very critical subsidy, which was, I think, last budget 2.25 lakh crores. It has been cut down to that 1.75 crores. Fertilizer subsidy, which is essential to keep at least the uh, production in agriculture at that level. In fact, similarly, when it comes to that of capital expenditure, there is not much capital expenditure by the central government in agriculture. It's small, but of course, about 194 crores last year allocated, but not spent properly. This year it's reduced to that of 84 crores.
Shame.
Similarly, same thing, irrigation also, it doesn't spend much. It allocates some money. Last year it's allocated 350 crores. That also is cut down to 325 crores this year. And in fact, when it comes to the question of, they have established what is called Agricultural Infrastructure Fund. Last year, there is an allocation of 500 crores, but we don't know what happened. Where is this agriculture infrastructure fund? What has happened to that? But the allocation is just kept there. I don't think much has been spent. I mean, and they announce so many, they have some kind of a names. It's very difficult to, they're all something like Priyam Pranam, and then they're talking in terms of, in Amrit Kal, there is something like Amrit uh, see, the kind of, let's say, millet program, these people give it a name. It's called, it appears, Sri Anna. Suddenly they discover there is a millet. And then, of course, they say that this is International Year of the Millet. See,
Yes.
what is the extent of millet and how much income a farmer gets? If you really would like to make a millet a economically viable crop for a farmer. If a small farmer, 3-4 acres, if he has to collect, let's say, corralu, or let's say fox millet or some other millet, what is the income he gets from that? They're all rain-fed crops. They get at the most per acre, let's say, 10 to 15 lakh, 15,000. I mean, if it is, since it doesn't require much of investment, all that they get is, if the rainfall is correct, they get. And see, how can a farmer survive if you are trying to say that go for millets? Yeah, they will go for millets. You think it's a so-called Sri Anna, highly nutrition? Yes, you require that. How do you promote it? Would you not ensure a proper price? You have to relative prices of these millets, which you propagate as Sri Anna, highly nutritious food. you have to subsidize so that farmer can get some income. No, they have a
Yes.
slogan. You make it Sri Anna, and then perhaps the fellow who cultivates Sri Anna will die without adequate food also. That's the kind of situation. We know where millets are cultivated, how they are cultivated, what is the condition of those rain-fed areas where millets are grown. None of these things are discussed. But it's a propaganda kind of a thing, they do that. Well, now I come to that of social sector also. It's not only the critical sector in India where more than, let's say, 60% of the population live, much of the rural population live, and which is the critical source, which is protecting us from any crisis like African countries. Now that there is a war, Russia-Ukraine war, and the kind of food crisis that they are facing, they're able to do it largely because of the farmers, in spite of, let's say, the kind of hard times they face, the poor incomes they get, they struggle to, this is their own survival, they struggle and give you, let's say, the food security, but that is being disturbed. In fact, when it comes to the question, food subsidy itself is reduced from, let's say, 2.8 lakh crores to that of, let's say, 1.9 lakh crores. They think that people are now ready, they have abolished that five extra kgs that they were giving as a part of public distribution system. Although they have extended that free distribution of 5 kgs for up to October. But in the budget, I think when it comes to the question of even, let's say, allocation to that of, let's say, particularly rural areas, Anganwadi play a critical role in the nutrition of poor children. And that allocation also reduced from 20,500 crores. It has come down to that of, let's say, something like 20. Uh, it's just, let's say, from 20,600 crores, it has been reduced to that of 20,500 crores. Same thing with that of, let's say, midday meal scheme, which is, I think, the one that supports the children in rural areas, even in urban areas. Midday meal scheme also, the allocation has come down from 12,800 crores to that of, let's say, 11,600 crores. And in fact, uh, women's welfare. I mean, I'll come to that women's, they talk about in the budget. That also has been reduced in this budget. In fact, if you take into consideration inflation adjustment, even if you raise many a time, if you adjust it for the 6% inflation, then actually the value that you allocate would be less than perhaps what perhaps it was last year. But if you also reduce allocation itself, then you adjust for real allocation, it would be much less. And this is the, in critical sectors like agriculture, social welfare, it is coming down substantially. In fact, one of the very disturbing thing is even the pensions. I mean, central government provides pensions in the name of, let's say, national assistance program. Very little part in the total pension that ultimately state governments add something, they give it, let's say, for instance, in Telangana, it made 2,500. In that, central role is, let's say, hardly 500. Even that is being reduced here. It is supposed to be some kind of an encouragement to continue it, but that encouragement also slowly, maybe they would even withdraw it. The worst is in the kind of supporting minorities. I mean, that in terms of the minorities, one of the major kind of a support was through that of support to that of minority children. This, I think, we can see in terms of education allocation. When we take into consideration education allocation, the so-called new education policy of 2020 speaks very eloquently what will happen to that of India in the coming years. It will perhaps thinks in terms of revamping. Maybe they add this so-called Amrit Kal in 25 years. But when it comes to the question of allocations, the 2020 education policy also recommends increasing allocation to that of, let's say, 6%. We have been talking of the 6% of GDP for education for a long time now, right from Kothari times. right, from 60s, but nothing of that kind happens. It is still around 3%. And when it comes to the question of this budget, it is marginal. I would say that if you adjust for inflation, it is likely to be a decline rather than the marginal increase. The marginal increase is something like 3%, I mean, in terms of budget allocation increase, which I think if adjust for 6% inflation, it would be less than that. That's the attitude. And if you take into consideration, for instance, the support systems, particularly scholarships, they have abolished certain SC, ST scholarships for research level, research scholarships. And when it comes to the minorities, it's a very drastic reduction. It's very disturbing also. For instance, when it comes to minorities educational support schemes, there is a drastic reduction by 38% from an allocation last budget, which is about 2015 crores, which is not much. It has come down to 1689 crores, 1689 crores. And if we look at the part of it, the pre-metric scholarships for minority students has been reduced from 365 crores to 44 crores. And if you take into consideration research schemes, that there are some research schemes that not much money was given, they want to redesign, let's say, madrasas, put more science in it. For that, they had about, let's say, roughly 2,200 crores, but that has been reduced to that of 10 crores. I mean, this kind of a drastic reduction for the minority kind of communities, because they are, of all the educational performance, they are below that of, let's say, uh, I mean, what we call as marginally above, let's scheduled tribes, below that of scheduled caste, and certainly below that of the OBCs and all that. In that situation, if
But do you think
education,
is
pardon,
anything to do? But do you think is this anything to do with their population explosion? So many children in their families, so many marriages
no,
in their.
this is another. I mean, that repeated kind of scientific or let's say census data
And I'm asking
shows.
for mine because if you have
No,
a
no,
family of two or three, and then
I'm saying
madrasas,
this.
I come
Yeah,
from the old city. I have
yeah,
seen mushrooming of madrasas, and
yes,
the way they are educating their children, they are
yeah.
going as per their religion. I don't know how the state government is allowing such type of religious minded education in that. Identifying
No,
with your religion, they are imparting education, identifying with your religion. When you do this, Hindus will follow. Then Christians already missionary schools are already
no,
there. How can you
no,
divide younger minds, the
no,
small
no.
mind
Actually,
at that
uh,
stage by imparting a, religious based education instead of a national education policy?
no, let me, Dr. Prasad Reddy, let me tell you that this allocation for madrasas by the central government of about 200 crores is to change that kind of a situation by putting money, because resources you put and then introduce certain subjects as compulsory subjects of science, technology, or kind of things. The part of this madrasa, revamping madrasa education, which should not be exclusively what may be called as religion oriented, but they must also see the great deal of injustice if they are doing it to themselves, if they exclude the kind of, let's say, comprehension exercises, and then of course science, environment, other kind of education, and then including maths, that
Yes.
would be disastrous, and you can't allow that to happen as a government. You have to intervene and then modify or modernize it. That was
But
the
what the
type of
state
education.
government see now central government is doing something in good spirit. But here let us take the example of TRS government and AIMIM is the principal
Yeah,
opposition party. It always
yeah.
allows the religious moorings to go on for vote bank politics. When such is the
Okay.
case, because I come from old city, the
Yeah, I know
the
that. I know you.
the pattern
See,
is they identify the unfortunately the Muslim population or other minority population, their children, they are identifying with their community instead of getting gelled with the Indian population. And this is a very disastrous trend. And TRS government, for the sake of votes, and AIMIM party, for the sake of votes, they are literally liberally allowing. If you come to this
so
part of Santosh Nagar, you will be surprised to see school going children. Now they have the traditional religious dress which they wear on every Friday or what. Now this has become very regular on every day basis. And when
No,
you
in
see
fact,
such type of
you see,
scenes, I feel very
no,
sad
you
and
see,
sad.
Shivaprasad Reddy garu, but what happens is this is exactly what perhaps this whoever has designed this kind of program. There are two things here. You have also mentioned about population. If you take into consideration the income levels, and then of course the number of children that they have, uh, either is a Muslim or let's say Hindu or anybody, any other community, several social groups, it goes with that of the low income because the
Yes,
low income people want few hands. What you see in one of the tragedies is even now if you walk in old city, you see poverty extensively.
yes,
Wherever
that's
there
what.
is poverty, there is also like more children.
Yeah,
No, it's not only Muslim community, any other community you see. So
yes,
that's exactly where there is a kind of a design that's part of this educational program for the minorities, including intervention in madrasas. There is another part. I mean, it was designed with good intention. Like, say, for instance, PM Janavikas. It is supposed to be money that goes to that of slums with more majority of population who are, let's say, minorities. The idea is improve their facilities, improve the education structure. Then, of course, they would perhaps be in a position to expose to other community kind of awareness. This exclusion or let's say ghettoization, what I can call that, will not be there. For that, the allocation was 1650. That's 1,500, 1,650 rupees in last budget for this PM, what is called Janavikas, addressing this kind of a slum minority concentration. But that has been drastically reduced to that 600 crores. That means what? You are trying to leave it to themselves, and then that's what they want. They divide,
yeah,
perhaps the Muslims are
they
like
are
that.
being exploited. Unfortunately, those minority families are being exploited by their religious heads, and they are being
Exactly.
trained. They are right from the day one. They are being trained in that religious discourse, including their attire. What is that they should wear? How they should be? So different
I,
from your Indian traditions. Because I have included Pakistan in
exactly.
2006. I have included
The
Pakistan in
more,
2006. Length and breadth.
no,
I have never seen such type of exclusion and misutilization of religious politics in the name of vote bank in the Pakistan. But
that's
we are being
exactly. In fact, since Dr. Gar, since you have come, you know Old City, I have also been observing. If you look at, let's say, Old City and the kind of no, and then other kind of what you are saying, identification oriented kind of even dress also. See, we used to observe over a period of time girls who are coming out, going to schools, colleges, like even Christian colleges, most of the Saint Anne's in, for example, Saint Anne's in, let's say, Medipatnam is a dominantly Muslim oriented thing. My own daughter used to go there, but there was nothing like Parda or any such thing. Most of the girls 20 years
yeah.
ago in the same college, now I think they are trying to, let's say, come back to their old systems. This
I'm
is
surprised
largely because,
whether that's what whether we are staying in India or Pakistan. I don't understand. That beats my
no, that's
intelligence.
exactly, see, we are
This is
trying to push
catering
them
to
to
the
that level.
political needs. Yeah,
No,
very
in fact,
unfortunate.
if you just, let's say, placate one side of the votes for your religion orientation, there are other equally intelligent people in the other side who are also trying to do that. And then, let's say, increase the tension. This is exactly what these present rulers are doing. That's a disastrous kind of a situation.
What I can suggest you, what the dangerous thing is the housing in my area, Santosh Nagar, Hitherto they were all Hindus. Now they're all Muslims, and we are in a minority. From where are they getting money? How they buying it? And still, how minority Muslims are being considered under poverty line? But huge constructions here. From where are they buying? And religious
No, they are
structures,
buying
all
from,
of a sudden, in between houses, religious structures come overnight. That beats my
no,
intelligence.
right.
Police
No,
doesn't say anything, GHMC doesn't say anything, but when you go for Hindu temples, and this is where they are trying to suppress, and TRS or MIM, they are trying to discriminate in the name of votes. If they
Both
do
of
that,
them are trying to take political advantage of
advantage.
that.
And the other side, BJP, I
And,
don't blame anyone, BJP or Congress, everyone trying to do their bit for the sake
no,
of
no, but
votes.
it
And
has
this
no.
is
All
destroying
that
the
I'm
Indian country.
saying is that
Yeah.
after this BJP, it has increased that kind of a thing. No, I would also make there is nothing, let's say, secret about it. A minority insecurity has increased after kind of certain things happened. For instance, since you are from this place, you must be in a position to reflect why they are getting concentrated into those few pockets. And then it's largely because some kind of a coming together
And
people,
here
their
now,
leaders.
I'll give you my side of opinion. It was before BJP, before 2014 itself. Believe me, the way their constituencies were redesigned, whether it is corporation, municipal corporation, uh, or assembly, they were designed in such a way that only Muslims can win. No one else can. And
That's
very unfortunately, now
no,
before
that's
BJP, before BJP came to power, and this was done to see that BJP did not win. But unfortunately, now this has become an advantage to BJP. But unfortunately, people like us who always believe in Indianism, we are suffering. How can you allow
no.
this religious paganism going around?
Actually,
Whether it is
what you are
majority or
saying is
minority, it's all nonsense. Yes, sir, please. Good.
those who believe in secularism face this tragedy. I mean, in fact, it's not a happy thing to see this kind of a trend. We thought when we were young, we thought all this would go, including that of caste system and all that. But it's everything is getting, let's say, what called it, come to the bottom. It's crystallizing in a wrong way, and either caste,
Wait, sir,
religion.
I see my neighbor now, younger children. They have only their community children as friends. Very pathetic. And what is that you are going to present AMIM or TRS to the world? Are you going to
That's
breed this type of religious fundamentalism in the name of oats or this thing? And someday, this youth of Muslim, I think minority, they will realize, as they have realized in 2019 elections. Many of the youth, I salute those Muslim youth, they did not go and vote. Least percentage. The election result was declared as was done in 2008 assembly elections. A day after, my petitions are still there. Why I am speaking is I am speaking with absolute record.
okay.
Immediately
No, in
electronic
fact,
basis. Yes,
I feel that that tendency is there. Ultimately, that would be a positive tendency, but I'm
yes,
afraid it it has a negative elements which may be much more dangerous. If the
that's what.
youth, if the youth in the both communities realize the way in which this kind of thing division is likely to destroy themselves, that
Yes,
would be a positive realization. But of course, if they start, let's say, deteriorating to the other side and trying to see the other as the enemy, then
tragedy.
it would be more dangerous. Actually, the
Good.
present politicians play that card and then they
Why I
gain
why,
immediate.
why I was stressing on this is what is hampering real growth. A budget really needs because of this divisive nature of amongst the youth, because youths are supposed to be the building blocks as proteins are in our body. When they become divisive at a very young or tender age, what sort of growth you expect and what sort of budget growth you expect, except those fancy numbers on the paper. Yes, sir, please go ahead. That is what I wanted to reflect.
No, no, exactly. I think these are, let's say, foundations, or let's say being. No, this is direct link with that of what we are referring to as the so-called neoliberal policies. If you allow health systems and education system to deteriorate into public institution without any services, the dominance of, let's say, private institutions come in, that there are many people who can't afford good kind of education. If you have one school which is called, let's say, neighborhood kind of a school, where in that neighborhood, let's say, both Muslim and then of course Hindus can sit and get quality education, perhaps there is a tendency towards that of mending this kind of a tendency, more awareness of, let's say, the living together,
Yes,
so-called, let's say, possibility of a brotherhood. But we are dividing it by, let's say, allowing corporates to enter into that of health education, that the poor have some hardly any kind of access, or let's say poor kind of private kind of health. This is where I think if we talk in terms of along with education, the the countries, in fact, we have a long list in this budget kind of a thing. If you look at, let's say, the allocation to the health, the ideal health education is any budget must have at least 2.5% of the national income, GDP, in public investment in health. But what is that we are providing? We have never crossed 1.5. Now it's stagnating at 1.8, which means the average citizen in India spends out of pocket 70 rupees out of, let's say, 100 rupees. What government provides is only 30 rupees out of, let's say, total health expenditure. Since, of course, I'm addressing a doctor also along with me, this deterioration also, let's say, adds to that.
Yes.
Education, you have division, poor people, some kind of a what is called as budget schools, private schools. Rich people have their own education. Same thing in the health facilities. So a combination of this leads to these divisions. Deprivation leads to that of these kinds of divisions, and therefore there is no reflection in the budget, either in the allocation to education or health, the correctives to this. And people are asking for more for education, more for health, because these are the things which may perhaps help them to feel they have a common kind of, let's say, facilities, which perhaps therefore the concentration is such. The poor, whether Muslim or let's say the Hindus, they get totally deprived. In fact, much of their income hard earned is spent on, let's say, the so-called private schools. Even let's say if it is 300 per month, that is also a budget school for private school. Government schools get closed. I mean, this tendency should be checked. In fact, this is exactly where there is hardly any discussion or discussion leading to that of higher allocation, because many of the parliamentarians have become private school owners, and
Yeah.
then some people in Telangana are getting
Universities, private universities,
private universities. So
HS and MLAs and MLCs, MPs,
and
government,
7,800 the
medical colleges,
universities.
university, engineering colleges, medical colleges, private universities, and
So
what you
you have
expect of them? What budget what good budget for people you expect from such
exactly that's
parliamentarians
what I'm saying.
or
This
those
is
elected from assembly owning
absolutely.
medical colleges, private engineering colleges, private schools, and private universities? And what is that, Modi ji? What is that you are going to do? Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
This is, I think, this is exactly we say what we consider as public goods, like that of education, health, public transport. It should be provided by the government so that the citizens, regardless of their, let's say, levels of income, have access to that of quality facilities, which is, I think, a social sector expenditure. Any country, you see, I have this kind of a statement here on the budget following. If you look at, let's say, even China, the kind of expenditure that is spent out of, let's say, the national income, I mean, I'm sorry, out of the budget, is even in China, it's about 10%. You have a budget which perhaps hardly spends, let's say, 2 3% on, let's say, this is exactly 3.8% in India. Compared to that, even uh, a country like Brazil, South Africa, for instance, spends 16% of the budget on health. But I think how we can think in terms of better facilities. There is hardly any kind of emphasis, and this is the reason. In fact, the same thing happens to education also, that people who are entrenched into that of making what is called public goods into that of private profit earning enterprises like colleges, universities. They are also representatives who call themselves as people's representatives. This is the tragedy of a budget. You sit there and then perhaps how do you expect these people to think in terms of something different? This is, I
Common man.
think, foundationally
Very
something wrong
discriminated.
there.
Very discriminated.
Well,
Not only that,
I think,
I would like to
yeah,
add housing also. Education, health, transport, and housing. All
yes,
these all these things have gone into the hands of private players.
exactly.
Unfortunately, those elected to the assemblies, parliament, or panchayats or municipalities, these are the elected representatives who are controlling and regulating education, health, public transport, and housing. When the core
Hmm.
sectors have gone to elected representatives in the private way, Modi ji, what is that your budget is going to present to a common man, ordinary man?
No,
Yes, sir.
exactly. That has happened. In fact, public goods going out of public concern and public allocations has started happening. In fact, if you look at the Commonwealth countries, right from Canada, of course, UK, Australia, or other countries which are part of, including India, except India, in Commonwealth countries, education and health, even now, is the concern of the public investment. No, there is nothing like, let's say, huge share of, let's say, private investment in education in any of these countries. So we have somewhere missed the bus. Even the richest countries, that they take care of education at least up to 18 years, free, compulsory, quality education for everyone, entire
No,
Europe.
no
And you
discrimination.
talk in terms. Huh?
No
See,
discrimination.
this is exactly where you build a democracy by building citizens who have some kind of an equal kind of a opportunity. If you give education, they will go for it, whatever opportunity is there. But if you just differentiate right from, let's say, school, send some to madras, some madrasas, somebody else, they miss the kind of, let's say, opportunities, and they become, let's say, not the kind of citizens perhaps which would share the prosperity of whatever happens. This is exactly where how the politicalize. No, they neglect. Now I come to, since of course I'm taking more time, now I
No, no,
turn to that of what this budget does. See, what this budget does is neglect these areas and then propagate what they are doing as a great achievement. If you look at, let's say, if you look at perhaps what they highlight, the this is exactly politics come in. All that we discussed also part of politics in budget. But I think in this budget, 23-24 budget, the finance minister was saying that hard working. Suddenly they have discovered in the first year of Amrit Kal, middle class are hardworking. They in the party meeting also they say that middle class is important, and the budget also they start saying hard-working middle class must be given some incentives. What incentives? They start, let's say, addressing our income tax. How they have addressed, there cannot be more deceit than what they have done to income tax. You know that they said the exemption limit has been increased from 5 to that of 7 lakhs. I mean, what does it mean these days? 5 to 7 lakhs means what? The finance minister went on saying, our own calculations. Now, a person who has 7 lakhs of rupees doesn't pay income tax. If it's, let's say, more than 7 lakhs, he will pay. Next bracket, he will pay 15,000 as income tax. That means, no, he saves 15 lakhs if he goes to that of 7 lakhs to 10 lakhs. He saves 15,000 per annum. What a great saving for a people. And then, if you look at the kind of mischief they have done, they have raised the exemption limit 5 to 7 lakhs, and then let's say the highest bracket of, let's say, what we call marginal rate remains, let's say, 30%. That means above 15 lakhs of income will all of them, whether it's I get 15 lakhs, 30%, Ambani gets whatever 15,000 crores is also 30%. But earlier there was some corrective to that. Even in this government, they used to have surcharges for different, let's say, there are also surcharges in terms of education and health also, that what they do, that's a different thing. But these surcharges meant substantial kind of a progressivity. For instance, the highest tax rate along with surcharges used to be 42.7%. That means a person who gets more than 5 crores will also be paying a tax which would come to that of 42.7%. Now, what they have done, On the one hand, they made so much of propaganda of hard working middle class. They have raised this 5 lakhs to limit to 7 lakhs and removed surcharges of
That's
a
it.
certain variety. Now what happens is removing surcharge from 42.7% and reducing it by 4% to 39% means as you go along, for instance, I have a table which has calculated it. What happens is if you have, let's say, an income of 50 lakhs, you save, let's say, in the tax up to, let's say, 50,000. If you are a 50 lakhs person, because if you are 7 to 10 lakhs, you save 15,000. If you are 10 lakhs person, you save, let's say, about 55,000. If you are 15 lakhs person, you save about 55,000. But what about a 5 crore person? A 5 crore person also saves, let's say, 49,000. But after that back bracket, there was a surcharge which was very steep that made the income tax from that slab onwards 42.7%. If your income increases above 5,000 crores, I mean 5 crores, I'm sorry, above 5 crores, the tax earlier was supposed to be 1.91 crores. Yeah, if you have 5 more than 50, that means 5 crores, 1.91 crores is the tax. That was the tax. If it goes to 55, I'm sorry, 5.5 crores, the tax would be 2.31 crores. That was earlier. But now what happens? This 2.31 crores comes down with the new tax to that of 2.1 crores. That means your difference is 22 crores. 22 lakhs. That means richest people who have more than, let's say, 5 crores of income get a complete, let's say, go out of, let's say, save tax to the extent of 22 lakhs per year. We keep on talking about 15 lakhs,
15,000.
15 lakhs and below. Exactly, 15 lakhs, 15 lakhs and below, you save 15 to that of 20, 50,000. And a fellow who is more than, let's say, 5 crores now gets 22 lakhs exemption. And this is exactly at a time when we are saying inequalities are rising. Globally, there is a conference of OECD countries. They said that there must be minimum tax. All these things are discussed. But in a country where there is a huge Oxfam reports and then several studies on inequality, every day it's increasing. Then you reduce income tax on the top bracket and then propagate saying that we have raised the exemption from 5 lakhs to 7 lakhs. This is one. This is absolutely election propaganda. Because
Fraud. It's fraud on people. Mr. Modi and Nirmala Sitharamanji, you need to answer. You need to
yes,
answer such a big fraud.
it's
Deceit.
it's a clever and I would also say cunning fraud because without saying what you've done to the very rich brackets, you're only talking about. She has
That's what.
mentioned this. She has mentioned only that surcharges, the income tax including surcharges, the top limit has come down from 42.7% to 39%. She didn't say how much they save by way of taxes. She was only talking about 15,000 rupees of the middle class. But
Yeah.
second, why is it the middle class is projected? Because no, there is a general feeling this is what the ruling class thinks. That's why their party meetings also they talk about it. Middle class is slightly getting uh, what is called disturbed or disillusioned by the present government. There are things which are not happening and therefore they are disgruntled. This is the most vocal class. She also, of course, emphasized there are also many of them salaried class. They talk about, let's say, misdeeds of the government. And therefore, the first thing is this is the so-called not only Amrit Kal first budget, the last budget of the present government, they go to elections. Therefore, remove this kind of disgruntlement. appease, let's say, the middle class. This is the strategy. And then, of course, there are two other classes they have started appealing. Suddenly, they discover the second point that I make is the political dimension. The budget is they discover women are very important in the country. They have high role to play. Suddenly, in all these days, they never spoke of women's role in, let's say, economy. They say that they are the backbone of the economy. They are, I think, this has to be understood. They have not done, of course, any budget allocation, but they only said, therefore, women must be given a right to save more because they are major support of, let's say, the family. Therefore, their savings must get reward. Therefore, they've introduced something like 2 lakh worth of, let's say, certificates. Of course, you have to invest in that. They're not giving it at 7%. This is what they've done. But the propaganda is in the budget and outside the budget. The chief prime minister said the women play a role and their organization like self-help groups are very important. This has come because they have a feeling that this division of society into communities is not working in South. In South, rural women particularly are very strongly linked to that of the self-help groups. They are getting, let's say, interest subsidy. Center has no role. They are getting, let's say, very large amounts at low interest by way of credit, the self-help groups. Therefore, they are increasingly South Indian governments are appeasing, let's say, women by these programs. It's also true, right from Chandrababu's time. They thought these women's groups are important. Therefore, Chandrababu introduced low interest linked to that of banks, low interest rates. And then Rajshekhar said this Pavala interest. And then next person said no interest. That means it's self-help groups. Therefore, the reason is the southern, particularly governments, where there are strong self-help groups, they're not likely to be weaned by communal kind of lines. They're already in the trap of SHG incentives. Therefore, the budget talks in terms, although no provision except that certificate, talks in terms of women's important role. The third political element, this is also an electional element, is about Northeast. The allocations from the center to Northeast states, of course, they are going to elections right now, 3 states, right from Nagaland, Tripura, and other Meghalaya, I think. They focus on them, the doubled allocation. That's the allocation to Northeast is something like from the center, the allocation was something like I think the number somewhere here. The idea is that in every program, the central element has become very strong in Northeast. So whereas your agriculture, social sector, everything languishes, you have soft corner for Northeast suddenly, and then trying to introduce in the name of PM's programs and transfer what is thought, they call it a donor. This is the Department of Northeast region. There is donor. The donor allocations suddenly goes by 100%, more than 100% they've increased. I mean, this mischief is done that they have tried to show that they are trying to help middle classes, which I think exactly in the tax rates, if you look closely, exact in the corporate sector, that's why corporate sector is very happy. They don't say this. They say it's a capital investment has increased 33%, but they don't say how much they gain. All these managing directors who no one gets less than 5 crores in total. They are the people, and then of course many of the other kind of rich communities get exemption. But they're happy that this budget has done something for capital expenditure, but indirectly this is the kind of a division. Therefore, when it comes to the question of present budget, although they tried to revive growth by, let's say, trying to put some kind of infrastructure emphasis, the entire design of neglecting welfare of people in agriculture and other poor sections And then neglecting public goods is one of the disastrous kind of elements. It has to be seen with the kind of, let's say, critical eye. And this government is misleading people by saying that the budget has much provision for the middle class. Actually, it is a budget which takes the support that of corporate sector to higher levels. And then when it comes to corporate tax itself, that in 1920, Jaitley reduced the corporate tax drastically to that of 22%. Then now effective corporate tax paid last year is only 21%. And if you look closely, corporations which earn more than 500 crores profit pay less than 20% of corporate tax because there are so many exemptions. At net, they pay something like 19%. Only even in corporate sector, those who earn less than, let's say, 500 crores profit, they end up paying, let's say, 22%. See, this kind of a uh, system of a budget which is being handled in favor of the rich and the corporate sector is sought to be projected as if and denying welfare measures to the poor is being, let's say, projected as, let's say, progressive budget. This has to be seen through by the public, and therefore we have to face it. What kind of rulers we have, whether they perhaps are for the prosperity of agriculture and other poor, or they're for the prosperity of the corporate giants. I think a separate discussion could be. I heard about the Adani's thing from the same channel. I don't have to talk about, let's say, what kind of crony capital we have. Thank you very much, Dr.
Yes,
Prasad.
yes. I would welcome you for Adani's. We will have a separate. How come
Yeah,
during COVID-19 when people were dying, people were losing jobs, all of a sudden two A's from Gujarat become neo-rich, enter Forbes list, and our Prime Minister was about to celebrate. When we pointed out, he immediately withdrew. In Telugu, ఉంటే శవాల మీద పేలాలు ఏరుకోవడం శవాల మీద పేలాలు ఏరుకోవడం అంటే ఇదేనేమో
exactly. They have,
immediately withdrew.
most of the corporates have made big money during that COVID period. Nobody has suffered any losses. And in fact, this Adani
Now
thing is
Modi and
really
our
upstart.
yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Really
Please.
upstart in the sense in 1980s, he was a small trader, some import export kind of business. Within, let's say, last, let's say 30, 40 years, if one could, let's say, celebrate his birthday, 60th birthday, by instituting a 60,000 crore worth of trust, you can imagine the kind of money that he has made in a very short period. And he wants to gulp all other, let's say, bigger ones also.
But
That's it.
how can the government, who is a representative of the people, citizens, be so silent and spectator? Because he is judiciously utilizing our natural resources, our human resources, and he is becoming big. See the way they are taking about airports, and these fellows charges Indigo or SpiceJet or these fellows, the way they charge you are using my land, using my space, my air, using my every resource, bloody using my human resource, and you are taxing me in thousands, 10,000, 20,000 per ticket to travel from
Yeah,
Hyderabad to Kochi, or for that matter, in emergency, if you want to travel even Hyderabad to Madras, how
yeah,
much
yeah,
distance it is? 500 kilometers. What is this nonsense? I've been writing mails to both President, Prime Minister, Civil Aviation Minister, and all these fellows. They don't respond, making mockery. Mr. Modi ji and
yeah,
Sitaraman ji, you are becoming a laughing stock in front of the world. 5 trillion, oh, that one. Who wants that? We want
yeah,
the basic necessities like food. Why my food is becoming costlier? When farmers are not getting their due. Now, with this budget, you have almost killed the spirit of farming. Agriculture, you have almost killed it now. Where is the MSP? You point out. And why farmer is not getting any price and so many deaths happening, farmers committing suicide. And when I am going to buy some food, it is very costly. Farmers
yeah,
are dying who produce. When I am going to buy, it is becoming very costly. How?
yeah,
This is how Adanis and Ambanis, instead of FCI godowns where they do storage, you are allowing hoarding in the private sector because they take all your food produce from farmers, they keep it there, till the demand comes, and they buy it for 10 paisa and they are selling it at 10 rupees for me. And for doing that, again, you are giving them exemptions as you have done
No,
in this budget. In
in
this,
fact, but for Reddy, but for the farmers' agitation, the three laws were designed at the behest of them. You remove all these things, allow the market, means I become, let's say, controller of all the grains. That was the design. But of course, even after not withdrawing the laws, they are doing the same thing. They are the wholesalers now for every commodity.
that's what everywhere.
Ultimately, it
See,
goes there.
now Amazon, they say world leaders, Amazon has gone. They are not allowing the competitive spirit to thrive except Adani or Ambani. They are there in every sector. See,
Absolutely.
if they want to take a public sector, Mr. Modi ji or Nirmala Sitaraman ji, all chief ministers, political parties heads, and all those big economists, if they want to take over a public sector unit which has natural resource and human resource belonging to every citizen, do you have similar type of structure which has been handled by this corporate sector? If not, why is that you are handing over this to them? This beats my
It's a
intelligence. Infrastructure, that is where we say infrastructure, huge infrastructure investment. Bloody, without investment, why are you giving my public sector unit to corporates, Adanis and
exactly.
Ambanis? Who the hell you are
No,
to give me? You are just a custodian. You are my representative. If you want to have a competition, let Adanis and Ambanis come up parallelly with such type of infrastructure.
no.
For say
In
Nizam
fact,
Sugar
they
Telangana,
are there to grab infrastructure, like
they will
North.
grab the infrastructure, they will grant the precious land, they will grab the human resource and all the natural resources. If it is a cement industry,
Absolutely.
land allocated, all the
Absolutely.
minerals are there. What is that you are doing, Mr. Modi ji? And for them, surcharges have gone. Now you say 5 to 7 lakhs. Cost is increasing. Inflation is increasing. And who is
Yeah,
benefiting? Again, these hoarders. The so-called
yeah,
30% slab which you have reduced. So many exemptions for them. Instead of FCI strengthening Food Corporation of India, investing 3,000 to 5,000 crores in every state, every panchayat, or for that matter, every mandal, drying units,
yeah.
warehouses,
No,
cold storage units. By having that, farmer can have and he can dry his crop and he can store his crop either in warehouse if it is a dry crop, or any perishable goods he can store it in a cold storage and he can sell on his own. Instead,
absolutely.
you are allowing these luxuries to hoarders. They say they are like Adanis and Ambanis and their wealth is growing. Then why for this government, Mr. Modi ji? In whose interest? You are collecting my tax. You are making to pay my tax. Discrimination at the basic level, education, health, housing. See Ambani, such a huge structure of house. Adani, the way they celebrate their birthdays, who the hell they are, Mr. Modi? Who the hell they are? And why do you want to celebrate that? He's becoming, entering new Forbes list. You should be ashamed. We are a welfare state, a democratic country, a constitution, republic. It is not a banana republic. When they could utilize our resources, how is that you are allowing these individuals to become bigger than the country, people itself? Is it not a shame? That in there itself, the budget fails everyone. Whether not Modi, earlier also UPA, Modi, the way they give incentives, 30,000 crores waived off. In whose interest? Subsidies. In whose interest? Why farmers, agriculture not getting subsidy? Why students? We don't get any subsidy. We have to prepay loan. Health, housing. What is that nonsense? And in whose interest this budget is being presented? And why should we elect such representatives who are controlling our education, private institutions, private universities, private transport? They own Ola to everything. They are owning everything
So,
now. Public
I
transport
think
getting into their hands. Then
people must be, as you are mentioning, must be aware there are something called public goods. A democratically elected government's first responsibility is to provide access to quality public goods like education, health, transport, uh, by the public sector, and then only perhaps the budget will have a meaning. Then otherwise, it's also It's not budget that's meant for, let's say, growth and welfare, but it's a budget meant for growth and prosperity of the rich, to that of, let's say, become richer and poor to suffer. That's what is happening. I think all the points you made make a lot of sense. We keep on repeating this.
Yes.
Differentiate between public goods and make fundamental responsibility of the budget to provide public goods to that of public revenues, and
Yes.
collect public revenues properly through progressive taxation, not perhaps giving, let's say, retrograde kind of exemptions. People with very high income get high exemptions. People with, let's say, low income get lower exemptions. This is, I think, outright deception, which
This is
perhaps we
outright
don't expect from
deception.
government.
This has to be controlled. Adani is also Satyam fudging of accounts. 1 rupee to 10 rupees, they raise the value. On that 10 rupees, again, they will go to your banks. Our money is there. They loot in the form of loans. Again, they'll come back to public. They go for shares. Again, they grab whatever savings we have. We were forced to invest in that stocks, saying that stocks will have life rather than having savings in your bank. And again, they will get international funding these days. Kota Bichagalaka venture capitalists are there. They will fund. How? Basing on the resources you have already provided, the natural resources on which an industry comes, and the capital value from 1 rupee deceptively increasing 10, and they loot from the banks. Private, again they fund, and again we are hopelessly buying those shares in the name of trying to become rich, and all this is looted. And that is why what Adani's downfall, we are going to discuss this again where and wherever it is. And if it is true, it is nothing but it's a shame on our own. Why? Because our natural resources, our human resources, we and our banks, and we are again subscribing to those shares and allowing all this put together. They are again taking loans from international banks or everywhere, and that is how they again segregate the personal wealth from the institutional wealth. Losses are for the industry, but personally they will enter Forbes list. Can this happen anywhere in India? It is happening. US, we have seen 11 brothers. The corruption and the politicians and the administrators, along with that propped up media, is allowing loot of our resources. Why? Because we are not engaging ourselves with proper information that we are a constitutional authority, we are citizens, they are elected representatives, they are just public servants. Whether it is Prime Minister, Chief Minister, Chief Secretary, or Cabinet Secretary, who the hell he is, they are nothing but public servants. And they should work in a transparent and accountable way. What work? Our aspirations, our real welfare, our real growth, without disturbing the environment again. Because we should live in symbiosis with the environment, not to make rich to become richer. No, we should have a safe life with in symbiosis with nature or environment, so that our health is our wealth. We present in a proper way so that we can save and preserve something for our own kith and kin in the future. The way climate change is happening, the temperatures are rising, still the Modi government, all the state governments allowing mines, coal mines, and we are having non-conventional energies from these coal belts and everything, lot of carbon, and at the same time they are destroying agriculture. These agricultural plants would have absorbed this carbon dioxide, and those greens, they would have given us health as well as oxygen and good climate. They would have reduced temperature. At one go, they are destroying our own life and existence. That is why they say they are answerable, responsible to us in the form of budget every year. What resource you have utilized, how is that you have improved my life, whether it is education, health, my public transport, my housing, and what is that you are going to give to my children tomorrow. They are accountable. And what are these loans, to whom you are giving these loans, what are those industries, what happened to these public sector units, why they are going bankrupt, why when public sector units where we work are becoming bankrupt, are getting into losses, how is that corporates are becoming rich? How is that
Yep,
they
I
are
think,
becoming rich? Is it not the failure of the government of the day, because of which these public sector units are getting into losses? When such is the case, you should shut up your business. You should resign and walk away. Allow another one so that they can rule in a proper way, so that our resources, our public sector units are stable, and we stay in a healthy atmosphere, so that an enviable competition happens to suit these working or fundamental public sector units, working public sector units, profit making public sector units. Let us have alternative private or corporates who can build similar structures, but not by ill-gotten money held by politicians, administrators, and by all those exemptions come and loot these public sector units, who are nothing but are with our natural resources, with our human resources. They are taking away everything on a platter, so that we become enslaved. Again, we are feeling whether another East India revolution is happening in India or what, whether all these corporate companies, because they are funding all these political parties. Electoral bonds have become opaque. Why did they become opaque, Mr. Modi and all political parties, during this COVID-19 nonsense? All these corporates, ill-gotten money to corrupt practices, I say. If they are funding you, why is that I should not understand which corporate company, how much money it is giving to which party? Why are you keeping it secret? That means you are allowing corruption, illegalities, loot. That is why we say this budget is not representing the aspirations. And likewise, all state assembly budgets, when you allow these looted fellows to fund political parties, and such elected representatives will try to strengthen their own private institutions, whether in
Yeah.
education, health, transport, or housing, so that we are enslaved and we become poorer and poorer and poorer. They enjoy their lives. This loot continues eternally. If that is the case, this budget will never serve any purpose, Mr. Modi ji. This 5 trillion, 10 trillion, in whose sake? What happened to your promise? 15 lakhs into every account. How many black money holders you have caught? And how many, during your rule, how many those illegal businessmen have been jailed? Politicians have been jailed. Kaleshwaram, your own minister, say 1 lakh crores fraud. Why did not you arrest? Delhi liquor scam, daily we hear. Why you are not arresting? So many income tax raids, in enforcement directorate raids. How many you have arrested, Mr. Modi? Political conveniences behind the this thing, patch ups, just divisive politics for electoral gains. Again, another drama, because you say you are for Hindu government. I am appealing to all Hindus. In 2019, what was the rate of agarbatti? The oil which we try to put, light the lamp in our daily pujas, it has doubled and tripled. And agarbattis, camphor, I'm giving you an example. They have all doubled and tripled. Then how can we survive when these core aspects of belief have doubled? And imagine the food, the surcharge, the food charges, inflation, the way they have risen, and the transport, then education, then health. Can a common man survive? A common Indian family survive in this? Now we have made cinemas all multi. What is that? If you go to a cinema, if a family of 3 or 4, you have to spend in between 500 to 1,000, Mr. Modi. In whose benefit? And they say, see, Patan, 1,000 crores, 2,000 crores. What is that nonsense going on? That fellow becoming richer, and I am becoming poorer. You are allowing such type of capitalist mind or mentalities to become richer and richer. Not me, a common man. Thank you very much, sir. We will have some related subjects regarding Adani, and very specifically and agriculture and
Sure.
those.
How they make money? Black money is made by them, not by poor people.
That
Yeah, we
that
will
should
meet. Thank you very much, Shiva.
very kind of
Thank
you,
you
sir.
very
Very
much
kind
for
of
that.
you. God bless you. God bless you. And do support DRTSPR channels, Citizen DRTSPR
Sure.
channel, and
I wish
Environment
there
People
are
DRTSPR channels
more
in a larger
channels
public.
like DSTPR. Yeah.
Yes, yes, sir. Dr. Tangella Shiva Prasad Reddy channels. Do
Yeah.
support them.
Yeah.
Whatever we have discussed, we invite those who are trying to opine in a different way with us. We will invite you. We will invite honorable guests also, so that we can discuss, debate, and differ. That is what is democracy is all about, which is not happening in the panchayat level,
Absolutely.
municipal level, assembly level, nor at the parliament level. It is only top to down what is happening, imposing. That is not democracy. That is why channels like us, we discuss with such wonderful guests very openly, very publicly, and you have every right to differ with us. We invite you to come and differ, to correct us with facts and figures, as we are doing with every wonderful guest. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you
Sukhanidra
very much,
Shubhratri.
Prasad Reddy.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Do support DRTSPR channels and subscribe it
Sure.
in a bigger way. Though YouTube and Google try to hide our subscribers list, our viewers list, we are not mindful of their ad money, because we want proper information by experienced guests to reach public, so that they can understand and they can correct themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Reddy.
Thank you.